The first ice block was heavier than Elias thought. He stood by the frozen lake, his breath making little clouds in the cold winter air. He took hold of the block he had just cut. It looked like clear glass in the middle, with milky white edges from the frost. He lifted it slowly, the cold bit through his thick gloves, and carried it up the hill to his cabin. His dog, Ash, walked behind him. Ash was a shepherd mix, gray and brown, with wise brown eyes. He had belonged to Elias's grandfather first. When Grandpa died 2 years ago, Ash became Elias's dog. Ash always seemed to know when Elias was trying something new and different. Elias had already cut 20 blocks that morning. He would need many more, maybe 200 or 300. He was not sure of the exact number. He only knew that this winter felt colder than any other in his 16 years. The old wooden cabin his grandfather built would not keep him warm enough to survive. So Elias decided to build a second wall around it, a wall made of ice. When the neighbors saw him carrying the ice blocks, they stopped their chores to stare. Old Henrik shouted from his porch, "What are you doing, boy?" "Building a home for the fish down there." Elias did not answer. He placed the first block 3 feet away from the north side of the cabin and went back for another. Ash sat near the cabin and watched carefully. By the second trip, Henrik came walking over. His boots crunched loudly in the snow. "Are you trying to freeze faster than the rest of us?" Henrik asked. "Ice walls around a cabin? That is the strangest thing I have ever seen in these mountains." Elias set the second block next to the first. He checked that they lined up straight. "Ice can keep heat inside," Elias said quietly. Henrik laughed, a loud, sharp sound. Ash flattened his ears. "Ice melts, boy. Before Christmas, your cabin will sit in a big puddle. You will come knocking on my door for a warm bed when this all falls down." Henrik turned and walked away, still shaking his head. But Elias had read his grandfather's old journals over and over. Grandpa Samuel had been a mapmaker and explorer. He had traveled far north, where winter lasts 9 long months. There, the native people built houses from snow and ice that stayed warmer inside than wooden cabins. The journals explained it in simple words. Thick ice traps, still air. Still air holds warmth. A wall of ice with a small empty space between it, and the wooden wall stops wind and keeps heat from escaping. Grandpa had drawn clear pictures and written careful measurements from real houses he had seen. Elias trusted those notes completely. He had made his own drawings all through autumn. He was sure this plan would work. The lake ice was perfect this year, thick, clear, and very strong. Elias used Grandpa's big crosscut saw. It was meant for 2 men, but he worked it alone. He fixed one end against a log and pulled hard with both hands. Each block took 20 minutes of hard effort. His arms shook. His back ached. He worked from sunrise until his fingers felt nothing. Then he went inside to warm them by the fire and returned to the lake. Ash stayed with him every single day. He watched the pile of ice blocks grow higher. Sometimes he sniffed around the snow, but he always came back to sit close to Elias. By the end of the first week, Elias finished the north wall. He stacked the blocks like bricks, packing soft snow into the small gaps to seal them tight. The wall stood 6 feet high, matching the height of the cabin roof. He left a 3-foot empty space between the ice and the wood, exactly as the journal said. When it was done, Elias stepped back to look. The ice wall shone in the weak winter sun, blue and white and solid. In places, he could see the cabin logs through it, like looking through thick, cloudy glass. Ash sniffed along the bottom of the wall, then looked up at Elias. "It will work, boy," Elias said softly, scratching Ash's ears. "Trust me." Ash wagged his tail once. He trusted Elias with all his heart. At least one friend believed in him, even if that friend walked on 4 legs. More neighbors came to watch as the days went by. Henrik brought Carl and Joseph, old men who had lived in the valley longer than Elias had been alive. They stood together at the edge of his land and spoke loud enough for him to hear. "He is wasting his time," Carl said. "One warm spell, and everything will melt." "There won't be any warm days until spring," Joseph replied. "But ice keeps things cold, not warm. Everyone knows that." "The boy is still sad about losing his grandfather," Henrik said. "Sadness makes young people do foolish things." Elias kept working and did not argue. He knew words would not change their minds. Only the finished wall would prove them wrong. He started the east wall, then the south wall. His hands grew thick with new calluses. His shoulders hurt every morning when he woke. His back complained each time he lifted a heavy block. But the walls rose higher day after day. Ash learned to stay out of the way when Elias carried ice. He sat quietly for hours. Sometimes he barked once to say, "Time to go inside. Your hands are shaking too much." By the beginning of December, 3 walls were finished, north, east, and south. They stood like shining shields around the cabin. Elias began the west wall, the last one. This side faced the strongest winter winds. Storms always came from the west, driving snow and bitter cold ahead of them. He made this wall extra thick. He cut larger blocks and placed 2 layers in some spots. He wanted no tiny holes where the wind could slip through. Henrik came by again, this time with his wife, Martha. She carried a basket covered with a cloth. Elias was inside the gap between the walls, checking his work. When they arrived, Ash barked once in greeting. His tail wagged hard because Martha had always been kind to him. She often slipped him bits of food when she thought no one was watching. "Elias," Martha called softly, "we brought you some fresh bread. I baked it this morning." Elias came out from between the walls. His face was red from cold and hard work. He took the basket and nodded thank you. The bread was still warm. The good smell made his stomach feel empty. He had not eaten since early morning. He was too busy trying to finish the west wall before the next big storm. Martha looked at the tall ice walls. She saw how carefully they were built. She saw how tired Elias looked. "Boy," she said kindly, "you should stop this. You will work yourself sick before real winter comes. This is not good for you." Elias looked into her eyes. He saw real worry there, like a mother's worry for a young person who lived alone with only a dog. "I thank you for caring, Martha," he said quietly, "but I must finish. I need to know if it works." Henrik made a low sound in his throat. His face showed both anger and a little respect. "You are just like your grandfather," he said. "Samuel was the most stubborn man I ever knew. Once an idea got into his head, nothing could get out." Martha touched her husband's arm. "His grandfather had learning," she said. "He traveled and saw many things. This boy is following what he taught." Henrik shook his head. His grandfather had sense enough not to build ice walls around his own home. But they left the bread. That night Elias sat by the fire and ate it. Ash rested his head on Elias's knee. Elias shared small pieces with the dog. Ash took them gently and looked up with thankful eyes. The bread tasted very good. Elias felt thankful for neighbors who brought food even when they thought he was doing something foolish. The west wall took 8 days to finish. On the 6th day, a snowstorm came. Elias worked through it. His hands grew so cold he could not feel the ice blocks. He moved by memory and strong will. The same strong will his grandfather had. Ash stayed with him the whole time. He was a gray shadow in the blowing snow. He would not leave as human, even when it would have been wiser to go inside where it was warm. When Elias placed the very last block, he stood in the middle of the gap. Now ice walls stood on all 4 sides of the cabin. He felt the change right away. The wind that had been howling all day was gone. Not weaker, gone. The air inside the gap was still and quiet. He could hear his own quick breathing. He could hear Ash panting beside him. Nothing else. The wind screamed high above the walls. But down here it could not reach. Elias took off his glove and put his bare hand on the wooden cabin wall. It felt cold, but not the sharp, biting cold that wind brings. Then he put his other hand on the ice wall. It was much colder. It pulled heat from his skin fast and made it hurt. But the air in the 3-foot space between the 2 walls felt calm and safe. Elias smiled for the first time in many weeks. His face felt strange from the unused muscles. He looked down at Ash. The dog's tail wagged hard because he felt his human's sudden happiness. "We did it, boy," Elias said. "We really did it." Ash barked once, loud and joyful. He jumped up and put his front paws on Elias's chest. Elias laughed and rubbed the thick fur. He felt the dog's warmth through his gloves. He felt proud and relieved and very, very tired all at once. The first truly bitter cold came on December 8th. Elias woke to a temperature 20 degrees below zero. The air felt thick and heavy. In past winters, frost would cover the inside of his windows. This morning the glass was clear. He touched it. Cold, yes, but not frozen solid. Elias stepped out into the gap between the walls. He wore only his shirt and pants, no coat. The cold was there, but it did not cut like a knife. It was bearable. He walked slowly all around, checking every part of the ice walls. There were no cracks, no melting, no weak places. The snow he had packed into the gaps was now hard as stone. Some blocks had frozen together, making the walls even stronger. Elias nodded to himself. A warm feeling of success grew inside him. Then he went back into the cabin. Ash followed, shaking snow from his fur. The dog settled by the fire with a happy sigh. That night Elias made a smaller fire than usual. It was a test. In past winters he burned 4 or 5 big logs to stay warm until morning. This time he made only a modest fire, just enough to take away the sharp edge of cold. He added 1 extra blanket to his bed and went to sleep, waiting to see what the ice walls would do. He woke once in the night, around 2 in the morning by his pocket watch. He thought he would be freezing. He thought he would see his breath in the air. He thought he would have to get up and build the fire again right away. But the cabin was warm enough, not hot like summer, not even very comfortable, but warm enough that his breath did not make clouds, warm enough that his fingers did not hurt when he moved them under the blanket, warm enough that Ash slept peacefully on the floor instead of pressing close to him for heat. Elias got up and looked at the fire. It was low, just coals and small flames. He added only 1 log and went back to bed. In the morning he counted. He had used less than half the wood he normally burned in one night. The ice walls were working. His grandfather's words in the journals were true. The idea was real. Elias felt many things at once. He felt proud that he had built it. He felt sad that his grandfather could not see it. He felt happy that he would live through this winter. He felt glad that the neighbors had been wrong. He sat on the edge of his bed with Ash's head in his lap. He let himself feel all of it for a quiet moment. Then he stood up and began the day. Henrik came by 3 days later. He stomped snow off his boots in the gap between the walls. He looked around at the tall ice barriers and at the safe cabin in the middle. He shook his head. Elias could not tell if it was wonder or still doubt. "You really finished it," Henrik said. His voice was careful and even. Elias was splitting wood near the entrance. Now that he needed less firewood, he was making good supply. He put down the axe and nodded. "Yes, sir. I finished it last week." Henrik walked all around the ice walls. His eyes looked at every part. He had built 3 cabins and 2 barns in his life. He knew good work when he saw it. The walls stood strong. No cracks. The blocks had frozen together. The snow he had packed between them was now hard as rock. "How much wood are you burning now?" Henrik asked. He stopped at the west wall and ran his hand over the ice. "About half of what I used before," Elias said. "Maybe even less. I have not counted every piece yet, but it is much less." Henrik frowned. His old face got more lines. "That does not make sense. Ice is cold. How can cold keep cold out?" Elias leaned the axe against a stump. "It is not the ice that keeps the heat," he said. "It is the empty space between the ice and the wood. The thick ice stops all wind. Wind cannot get through 2 feet of solid ice. The air in the gap cannot move. It stays still. Still air does not carry heat away. So the cabin keeps its warmth longer. We need less fire." Henrik thought about this for a long time. His breath made white clouds in the cold. "Did your grandfather teach you this?" Elias nodded. From his journals. He went far north and saw how the native people built their winter homes. This is a small copy of what they do. They have done it for thousands of years. Henrik made a low sound in his throat. It might have been respect. "Well," he said at last, "I still think it is a little mad, but it is clever madness. If it truly works like you say, then maybe there is something to it." He left without another word. But Elias noticed something important. Henrik did not laugh this time. He did not call him foolish. It was a small win, but Elias was glad. December grew colder than anyone could remember. The temperature fell to 30 degrees below zero, then 40 below. The wind screamed across the valley. It tore shingles from roofs. It broke trees with loud cracks like gunshots. Elias's cabin sat quiet inside its ice fortress. He could hear the wind roaring far above the walls, like a wild animal. But inside the gap, the air hardly moved. He kept his fires small. He had enough wood to last until March. His neighbors burned their wood twice as fast. They fought to keep their cabins from freezing. Henrik came again on Christmas Eve. He stood in the gap with his hands in his pockets. He looked up at the ice walls glowing blue in the evening light. "It is holding," he said quietly. Elias was inside, making a simple Christmas meal. He heard Henrik and came out. Ash ran ahead, tail wagging, happy to see the visitor. "Yes," Elias said. "It is holding very well." Henrik's face was red from the wind. His eyes watered from the cold walk. "My cabin is like ice inside," he said straight out. No pride stopped him now. "I burn 4 logs every hour just to keep frost off the walls. My wife sleeps in 2 coats and still wakes up shaking. I do not know if we will have enough wood for January if this cold continues." He stopped. The next words seemed hard for him to say. "How do you stay warm in here?" Elias looked into Henrik's eyes. He saw worry. He saw fear for Martha's safety. The ice walls blocked the wind completely. Elias explained. "The air gap traps the heat inside. I am burning maybe 2 logs every 3 hours, sometimes even less, and it is warm enough that I sleep without extra blankets." Henrik looked at the cabin, then at the tall ice walls, then back at Elias. His face showed many feelings at once: shame for his earlier words, hope for his wife, and a desperate need for help. "Could I build one like this?" he asked. "Is there still time? Is the lake ice still safe to cut?" Elias shook his head gently. "No, sir. There is not enough time for one person working alone. And with this deep cold and snow, the lake is too dangerous now. The ice moves and cracks. It is not safe." Henrik's face fell. He looked suddenly older, as if the worry for Martha's life pressed down on him like a heavy weight. Elias took a deep breath. He made a choice he knew his grandfather would have liked. "Would you like to bring Martha here?" he asked. "There is room. She can have my bed. I will sleep by the fire. Ash does not mind more people." Relief flooded Henrik's face. It was so strong it almost hurt to see. Shame was there too. Shame for mocking the boy who had built the very thing that would now save his wife. "You would do that?" Henrik asked, his voice rough. "After I called you mad? After I laughed at you in front of everyone?" Elias shrugged. He did not like too much, thanks. "You were right to doubt. It was a strange idea. I'm not doing this for praise. I'm doing it because it is right." Henrik reached out and shook Elias's hand hard, even though both their hands were cold. "You are a good man," he said quietly. "Just like your grandfather. Samuel would be proud." By New Year's Day, Elias's small cabin sheltered 5 people. Martha came first, grateful and quiet. Then old Joseph, who lived alone. Wind blew straight through cracks in his walls, and his fire could not keep up. Then there are Carl's 2 young children, a boy of 8 and a girl of 6. Their mother had died the year before. Their father was fighting to keep their house warm, but it was losing the battle. They brought what food they could share. Everyone stared in wonder at how the cabin stayed warm with only a moderate fire. On the second night, Joseph studied the ice walls by lantern light. "They do not melt," he said, surprised. "With all of us inside making heat with the fire burning, why do they stay solid?" Elias explained again. The outside air was far below freezing, so the ice stayed cold. The still air in the gap could not carry enough warmth from the cabin to melt the thick walls. Joseph listened, nodded slowly, and said, "Your grandfather was wise, and you were wise to follow him." The great storm struck on January 6th. It was the worst anyone in the valley could remember. Snow fell so thick that a person could not see his own hand in front of his face. Opening the cabin door showed only a wall of white. The wind howled like angry spirits. Gusts reached 70 miles an hour. The cold dropped to 50 degrees below zero. Cold enough to freeze skin in minutes. Elias's cabin, protected by its ice fortress, barely shook. Outside, trees snapped with loud cracks like gunfire. Heavy branches crashed to the ground. The wind screamed without stopping. But inside the gap, the air stayed calm. Inside the cabin, it stayed quiet and safe. Elias kept the fire steady, adding one log at a time. The 5 people listened to the storm, at first with fear. Little by little, they relaxed. They knew the ice walls were guarding them. The children played gently with Ash by the fire. The dog was patient. He seemed to understand they needed comfort. He let small hands pet him for hours. On the 3rd day of the storm, they heard pounding on the ice wall near the entrance. Elias pushed through deep snow in the gap and opened away. 3 more neighbors stood there, half frozen. Their faces were blue. They could hardly speak. "We could not stay in our houses," one gasped. It was Sarah, a woman whose husband had died 2 years ago. "The wind tore our door off. Everything inside is freezing. We tried to reach Henrik's place, but we could not see or breathe. Then we remembered your ice walls." Elias pulled them inside at once. He sat them by the fire and wrapped them in blankets. Soon, warm drinks and food helped them. Now 8 people filled the cabin built for one, but all were alive and slowly warming. Ash moved among them. He let cold hands bury in his thick fur for warmth. He brought comfort without words. That night, by the glowing fire, Henrik spoke for everyone. "This ice fortress has saved our lives," he said clearly. "Without it, many of us would be dead by now. Perhaps all of us." Elias shook his head. He did not want to be called a hero. "My grandfather saved you," he said. "I only read his journals and built what he described." Martha reached over and squeezed Elias's hand. Her fingers were warm now, safe from the cold that had nearly taken her. "You did far more than that," she said softly. "You had the courage to try something new when everyone called it foolish. You kept working alone until it was done. That courage gave us this safe place. You worked alone for weeks while we mocked you," Martha went on softly. "That takes a different kind of strength than just reading books and building things." The great storm lasted 5 full days. When it finally ended, the valley looked like a different world. Snow covered everything 8 feet deep in places. Trees lay broken everywhere. Several cabins had fallen completely under the heavy snow and ice. Elias's cabin stood strong. Its ice walls were even taller now. New snow had drifted against them and frozen hard, making the fortress stronger than before. The 8 people inside came out into the weak sunlight. They felt like soldiers after a long battle. They helped each other dig paths through the snow. They checked on other neighbors. They looked at the damage. 3 cabins were gone forever. Roofs had caved in. Walls had bent and broken. 2 more cabins were hurt too badly to live in until spring. Everyone met at Henrik's house, the biggest one still standing. 27 people crowded inside. All who lived within 5 miles came. Elias sat near the back. Ash lay at his feet. He listened as the grown-ups talked about what to do next. "We must rebuild," Carl said. His voice sounded tight and worried. "But we cannot rebuild in this cold. We will freeze before we finish the walls. And another storm could come any time. We need good shelter right now. Warm shelter that can stand against any winter storm," someone else added. Henrik stood up slowly. He looked around the room. His eyes stopped on Elias in the back. "I say we ask young Elias to teach us his way," Henrik said clearly. "We have one cabin that stayed warm in the worst storm we ever saw. 8 people are alive because of that cabin. We should learn how he did it." Heads turned. Everyone looked at Elias. His face felt hot. He did not like all the eyes on him. Ash pushed close against his leg, feeling his worry. Henrik went on, his voice strong. "I laughed at this boy. I called his work stupid. I made fun of him while he built the thing that saved my wife's life. I was wrong. I am man enough to say it now. His ice walls work. They work better than our old wooden ways. So I ask you, Elias. Will you teach us? Will you show us how to build what you built? Elias stood up slowly. The room grew very quiet. He looked at all the faces. He saw fear and hope and need. These were his neighbors. They had known his grandfather. They had helped raise him after his parents died. They had brought him food when he lived alone. I will teach anyone who wants to learn, Elias said. His voice was quiet but sure. But we must work as teams. There's not enough time for each person to build alone. We will cut ice together, haul it together, build together. An older woman named Marta spoke up. Where do we get the ice? The lake is too dangerous now. Snow covers everything. We cannot tell ice from land. Elias had thought about this during the long storm days. There's a slow part of the river 2 miles east. It freezes thick there. The water moves just enough to keep heavy snow away. The ice should be safe if we are careful. We can cut blocks there, bring them by sled. If we all work as one, we can build walls for the broken cabins in 2 weeks. Henrik nodded. It is decided. We start at sunrise tomorrow. Every strong person comes to help. The work started the next morning. 20 people went to the river with saws, axes, and sleds. Elias showed them how to check the ice. Tap it and listen to the sound. Drill small holes to measure thickness. He showed them how to mark lines, how to cut blocks all the same size, how to break them clean without cracking. They worked in groups. Some cut ice. Some pulled sleds full of blocks. Some were stacked at the cabins. The first new ice fortress went around Carl's broken cabin. They made the walls strong around what was left. They left a 3-foot air gap to keep his children warm. It took 3 days with everyone helping. When it was done, Carl stood in the gap between ice and wood. Tears froze on his cheeks. My children will sleep warm tonight, he said, his voice shaking. Thank you. Thank you all. They built 4 more ice fortresses in the next 2 weeks. Old Joseph's cabin, Marta's house, the Peterson family home, Widow Anderson's little place. Each one went faster. People learned the way. They understood why things mattered. They worked better together. Elias went from place to place. He checked the gaps were right. He fixed small mistakes. He explained why the airspace must be exactly 3 feet. Why do blocks go like bricks when higher than the one below? Why packed snow makes the best seal? By the end of February, the valley had changed. The old wooden cabins that fought winter alone now had shining ice fortresses around them, blue and white in the sun. People burned half the wood they used before. Homes stayed warm on the coldest nights. Children slept without waking cold. When another storm came in mid-February, everyone stayed safe. The ice walls stood strong against wind that would have killed them months before. Spring came late that year. The ice walls lasted until mid-April. Then the sun grew stronger. Water dripped. Blocks shrank and fell. They turned to puddles that soaked into the earth and helped new grass grow. By May, all the ice was gone. Only wooden cabins stood alone again. But the valley was different in more ways than buildings. Henrik called a big gathering to thank Elias. Everyone came with food and small gifts. They spoke words of thanks. Henrik stood and gave a short talk. He spoke of courage, of new ideas that seemed strange at first, of saying I was wrong when you learn better. Elias took their thanks quietly. He gave credit to his grandfather's journals. He did not like too much praise. But that night, alone in his cabin with only ash, he let himself feel proud. He had saved lives not with great strength, not with fighting, not with loud hero acts, but with quiet reading, careful thinking, and day after day, hard work. His grandfather's old knowledge, joined with Elias's own strong will, had made the difference between life and death for families he had known all his life. Ash rested his head on Elias's knee. Elias scratched behind the familiar ears. We did good, boy, he said softly. Grandfather would be proud. Ash's tail thumped on the floor. In the dog's warm brown eyes, Elias saw full agreement. The next winter, Elias did not work alone. In October, people came to him. They asked to learn the ice wall way again. They wanted to build their fortresses before the deep cold came. He taught them with patience. He showed young ones who were learning for the first time. He helped older ones who had built before and wanted to make them better. By mid-November, 8 cabins had strong ice walls again. This time they were improved, thicker on the west side to fight the wind, better paths for spring meltwater, and stronger bases at the bottom. The winters after that were never as terrible as the first big one, but the ice walls became a valley tradition. Every autumn, when lakes and rivers froze, families cut blocks together. They built their fortresses side by side. They shared tools and food and stories. They helped neighbors who needed extra hands. Children grew up knowing how to build ice walls the same way they learned to chop wood or mend roofs. And everyone called them Elias's walls. Even when he was grown, even after he married Henrik's daughter Anna and built a bigger cabin for his family. And even after his own children learned to cut perfect blocks by the river. The way spread to other valleys. Travelers passed through and stopped to look at the shining blue fortresses. They asked questions. They learned about the air gap, about stopping wind, and about keeping heat inside. Some took the knowledge home and built their own. Others said it was too much work or too strange. But those who built the walls lived through winters that took lives in plain wooden cabins. Slowly, over many years, the ice wall way became known in all the cold mountain places. It became a normal thing for people who wanted to stay warm and safe in deep winter. Years later, when Elias was an old man, hair white, hands rough and bent from a lifetime of work, a young woman came to the valley. She studied at a faraway university. She wanted to write down old ways of living before they were forgotten. She sat with Elias in the cabin his sons had helped build. She asked about the ice walls. She wanted to know how he first thought of them. "I did not think of them," Elias told her with a small smile. "My grandfather saw them far north. He learned from native people who had lived with hard winters for thousands of years. They knew how to use ice and snow to stay warm. He wrote everything in his journals. I only read them and tried what he wrote. But you built the first one," she said. Her pen moved fast on paper. "You worked alone when everyone laughed and called you foolish. That took real courage." Elias thought back. He remembered Henrik's loud laughs. He remembered the heavy weight of the first blocks. He remembered Ash's tail wagging even when the work seemed strange. "I guess I was a little foolish," she said. "But sometimes the ideas people call foolish are the ones that save lives. And sometimes the old ways, the ways some call simple or old-fashioned, are the wisest of all." The ice walls still rose every winter in the valley. Elias's grandchildren built them now. They taught new families who moved in. They made small changes to make them even better. On the coldest nights, people sat warm by their fires. Safe behind wood and ice, they told stories. They told about the boy named Elias and his loyal dog Ash. About the boy who built the first fortress while neighbors laughed. About the boy who read his dead grandfather's journals and refused to give up. They told how one quiet, stubborn young man and his trusting dog changed winter forever in their valley. They told how frozen water, hard work, and old knowledge kept families alive when the storms came. And every time the wind howled outside, the ice walls stood quiet and strong, keeping that promise alive, one warm night at a time. If this story touched you, the tale of a boy, his dog, and the quiet courage that saved a whole community, then hit that subscribe button for more heartfelt, inspiring stories like this one. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next adventure. Thank you for reading till the end. See you in the next story.